Stop. Stop right there. The beam from her flashlight cut through the darkness, trembling just enough that I could see the white knuckles behind it. My boot hadn't even hit the second step of my own gate when she shrieked, like she was trying to summon every cop in the county at once. It was 3:07 a.m., cold enough that the frost bit through my gloves, and all I wanted was to crawl into bed at my late grandfather's lake cabin after a brutal drive. Instead, I got this: headlights off, engine barely humming, opening my own gate, and that was apparently enough to set her off. "She's trespassing. She's breaking into a cabin by Lakeside Point," she shouted into the phone, voice ringing clear as church bells across the empty gravel path that I didn't answer. Not yet. I just stood there, moving slow, letting her adrenaline spill out into the night while I reached inside my coat for the one thing that always bought me silence: my federal badge. The effect was instant. Her face collapsed, lips parting, eyes glassy as a deer. I held the badge up, steady. "Ma'am, you just called 911 on a federal agent." For a second, she looked like her mind had left her body. "That was Karen for you. But let me back up a sec. Because nobody just finds themselves standing face to face with the queen of the HOA at 3 a.m. without a little backstory. My name's Riley Brooks, 37, federal wildlife investigator, and by most accounts, a pretty quiet guy. I don't go looking for fights, but I don't back down when one comes knocking. After a decade undercover, I figured I'd earned a break. So, I kept a promise. Came back to fix up my granddad's old place at Silver Pines, tucked away between woods and water, and, apparently, a small army of rule-loving neighbors. I wasn't there for war, not at first. That was before I met Karen. Mid-60s, helmet of blonde hair, sunglasses so big they'd make a welder jealous, pink clipboard clutched like a scepter. The very first words she ever tossed at me were, "Do you have authorization to unload here?" as I was backing up my trailer. She could quote HOA bylaws faster than a preacher quotes scripture and treated each infraction like a cardinal sin. I tried being patient, played nice. I smiled, told her I owned the place, even promised to move the trailer. Duke, my dog, barked once. She nearly leapt out of her sandals, storming off with a warning: "You'll hear from us." And I did. Letters, fines, noise complaints, even an official notice about my antiquated mailbox, the one my granddad put up in '72, but the real trouble started after a few quiet weeks. Porch repaired, roof patched, I'd started showing up at HOA meetings just to observe, see what game I was really in. Karen didn't just dislike me. She was threatened. Maybe because I didn't bend, maybe because I never bragged about my job, maybe because I was an outsider who didn't care about her hierarchy. When I left for a work trip and came back, the lock on my gate had been scratched, tire tracks I didn't recognize carved into my driveway. Camera? Unplugged. Somebody was poking the bear, waiting to see if I'd snapped. That's what led to the showdown at 3:07 a.m. My return, unannounced, headlights off, suspicion running high. I saw the shadow move before the light flicked on. Karen, robe, slippers, phone in one hand, pepper spray in the other. Her panic call. Me, holding my badge. But then, as she stumbled back, another figure emerged from the trees. A man, tablet glowing in his hands. "Wait, what are you doing here?" Karen stammered, voice cracking. He didn't speak, just raised the tablet, and suddenly, everything changed. On the screen was a night vision video. Karen, at my gate, whispering, "Just snip the wire. Pop the latch, he won't notice." The video ended. The air grew thick. Karen blurted, "That's taken out of context." The man shook his head. "It's from the HOA's new security program, Karen. You tampered with his property." When the cops finally showed up, Karen's story unraveled fast. Alan, the man with the tablet, revealed himself as another HOA board member, and he'd had enough. With video evidence, witness statements, and my badge out, the cops let Karen go with a warning, but that was just for the night. The truth was, she'd been using her position for years to run off anyone who didn't play her game, flipping properties to friends and family through shell companies, weaponizing fines, even pushing a neighbor into a forced sale after a bogus dispute. Alan laid it out for me the next day over greasy diner coffee and HOA minutes stained with syrup. This was a pattern, and I was supposed to be her next casualty, but I didn't scare easy. And now, neither did the rest of Silver Pines. People started coming out of the woodwork. Lindsay, a neighbor, thanked me for standing up to Karen. She'd made life miserable for years, but last night's standoff had changed the energy in the air. The whole neighborhood, it seemed, was waiting for someone to call her bluff. Things escalated fast. A late-night threat call. "You shouldn't have stayed, Agent Brooks." The man at the diner, ex-cop with a record, now on Karen's payroll. Lindsay caught Karen muttering, "We can't afford for him to dig too deep." It was a web, fraud, intimidation, forgery. And right at the heart, Karen's brother, supposedly missing for decades, but now glimpsed in the shadows of her black SUV. I gathered evidence, documented everything, called in favors from my agency. Marcus, my old partner, showed up with a rookie in tow. Thermal scans proved someone had been watching my cabin, waiting for a moment to strike. Then the break-in. Karen and her enforcer, Richard, caught by my cameras rummaging through my safe, searching for something only they knew I was close to uncovering. Their mistake was thinking I'd let it slide. The neighbors rallied. We held an emergency meeting, 36 folks under the pavilion roof, nerves raw, the story spilling out at last. Alan produced soil reports showing Karen's cousin was planning to build a private marina, shutting out the entire community from the lake. Lindsay waved a photo of Karen on the barge. They voted unanimously. Karen's reign ended in one furious, cathartic roar, but Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The next day, she waltzed into the community center with a new deed signed by my grandfather, proving she owned my property. I confronted her in front of everyone. Marcus read out a sworn statement from her brother, who had finally been found and rescued from her control, confirming forgery, threats, everything. The crowd turned on her. Deputies cuffed her right there, screaming about how she'd built Silver Pines, how we'd regret it. And for a while, there was peace. The lake calmed, the air lighter, hope flickering back into the eyes of neighbors. David, Karen's brother, finally free, sat on my porch watching the sun go down over the water, grateful and quiet. Alan took over the HOA. Lindsay ran communications. The bylaws were rewritten. I stayed, built a greenhouse, fished from my granddad's dock, and tried to forget the chaos. But sometimes, when the wind shifts just right and the pine trees start whispering, I remember what Karen said as she was dragged away, about knowing where the bodies were buried, about not being done yet. If you've ever felt the ground tremble under the weight of secrets, if you've ever faced down a bully hiding behind rules and watched them crumble, tell me, do you think justice ever really ends, or does it just wait for the next neighbor to say enough? Drop your thoughts below. In a world full of Karens, sometimes the only thing it takes to fix a broken place is one good neighbor willing to stand their ground. Like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know where you stand on justice, loyalty, and what really makes a community.